Baghdad, Iraq, early 2006. Before dawn, the city did not sleep. It listened. Generators hummed behind blast walls. Dogs moved through alleyways. Somewhere beyond the concrete maze of Dora, Adhamia, and Mansour, American helicopters could be heard long before they appeared. In Iraq, sound was intelligence. A Black Hawk moving through the night could bring overwhelming force, but it could also give a target the one thing every fugitive needed most: warning. By this stage of the war, the hunt for al-Qaeda in Iraq had become one of the most technologically intense campaigns in modern military history. Joint operations centers watched live video feeds. Signals teams tracked phones. Assault forces moved with night vision, encrypted radios, air cover, quick reaction forces, and a vast intelligence machine built to find one man inside a city of millions. But the enemy had adapted. Al-Qaeda couriers changed houses. Bomb makers moved before dawn. Hard drives disappeared from laptops. Mobile phones passed from hand to hand. The more visible the raid became, the more the target learned to read it. Then, inside the same war, another method began to matter. The SAS did not always arrive from the sky. They often came by road, in ordinary vehicles that looked like the traffic around them. No dramatic rotor noise. No obvious warning. No large footprint announcing that a special operation had begun. Their advantage was not that they had better technology than the Americans. They did not. Their advantage was that they understood when technology itself could become a signal. Task Force Black, the British Special Forces element working inside the wider coalition hunt, operated in a world where seconds mattered. Its men were not trying to look powerful. They were trying to arrive unnoticed, strike before the target understood what was happening, and leave with the one thing more valuable than a body count: intelligence. That was the quiet difference. In Iraq, the most expensive system could find a target, track a target, and overwhelm a target. But if the target heard it coming, the system had already lost part of the fight. The SAS were hunting a different way. In late 2005 and early 2006, the British role in Baghdad changed from a separate national effort into a more closely integrated part of the American-led Special Operations Campaign. Task Force Black, built around an SAS squadron and supported by other British specialist units, was drawn deeper into the joint campaign against al-Qaeda in Iraq. The wider task force included American and British special mission units, intelligence assets, aviation, surveillance, and analysts working from bases such as Balad, where the war was increasingly being fought through raids, interrogations, recovered phones, and the rapid exploitation of captured material. But the British contribution was never simply a smaller copy of the American one. The SAS had come from a different tradition. Its modern mythology had been built in deserts, mountains, jungles, and urban counter-terrorist rooms where independence was not a slogan but a requirement. The regiment's selection system did not just test whether a man could run, shoot, or carry weight. It tested whether he could keep making decisions when tired, isolated, and uncertain. In Baghdad, that mattered. A target house could change in minutes. A street that looked empty could become hostile. A single, unnecessary radio transmission could tell watchers that something was wrong. So the British method placed unusual weight on judgment at the lowest level. Where a large helicopter assault could dominate a building, a small ground team could sometimes dominate the moment before the building knew it was being watched. That was the window the SAS wanted. Not the dramatic arrival, but the silent closing of distance. Not shock created by noise, but shock created by absence. By the time the door went in, the target should still believe the night outside was ordinary. This did not mean the SAS rejected technology. They used intelligence, surveillance, communications, and the wider coalition network. But they did not worship the machine. Technology helped them find the target. It did not always decide how they would touch it. That distinction became important during hostage and counter-network operations in Baghdad. In the search for the kidnapped Christian peacemaker team's workers in 2006, British Special Forces carried out repeated house raids and detentions to build the intelligence picture piece by piece. Open-source accounts describe dozens of raids connected to that effort, many of them conducted by British Special Forces. The pattern was clear. Each operation was not an isolated strike. It was a link in a chain. By the spring of 2006, this chain had become the central logic of the campaign. One raid produced a name. That name produced an address. The address produced a phone. The phone produced another house. It was not glamorous work. It was not the clean, single-mission story that looks dramatic on a map. It was slow pressure applied at high speed. The Christian peacemaker team's hostage crisis showed how this worked in practice. Four activists had been kidnapped in Iraq in November 2005. One of them, the American Tom Fox, was later killed. The remaining 3 hostages, including the British citizen Norman Kember, were freed on March 23, 2006, after an intelligence-led military operation. Open-source summaries of the campaign describe repeated raids, arrests, and searches used to build the picture until the location could be acted on. That mattered because counterterrorism in Baghdad was not just about finding enemies. It was about finding them faster than they could move. Al-Qaeda in Iraq did not behave like a conventional army. It did not hold a front line. It lived inside neighborhoods, safe houses, mosques, markets, workshops, and family compounds. Its bomb makers and couriers were protected less by armor than by time. Give them minutes and they could disappear. Give them hours and an entire network could scatter. So the question facing every special operations force was brutally simple. How do you remove time from the enemy? American forces often relied on scale. Helicopters, airborne surveillance, large intelligence fusion centers, and rapid exploitation. It was powerful, and in many cases it worked. British forces, shaped by the SAS culture, leaned toward minimizing their visible footprint. Use the intelligence network, but do not let the target see the assault coming. Move close before the last moment. Keep the team light enough to adapt. Trust the men on the ground to make decisions without waiting for every answer to come from a screen. This was not because the SAS were primitive. It was because they understood that in a city like Baghdad, silence could be a weapon system. Every time a vehicle rolled unnoticed through traffic, every time a team reached a door without announcing itself from the sky, the enemy lost the warning gap it had learned to exploit. The SAS were not trying to outspend the war. They were trying to compress it. That compression depended on something older than the Iraq War itself. The SAS had been created in 1941 for small unit raids behind enemy lines in the North African desert, where success depended on mobility, deception, and the ability of small teams to operate far from conventional support. Its later post-war role expanded into counterterrorism, surveillance, and special operations, but the core idea remained consistent. A small force, properly selected and trusted, could create effects far larger than its size. In Baghdad, that tradition met a new kind of battlefield. The city was not the open desert of 1941. It was crowded, watched, wired, and politically dangerous. Every operation created ripples. A helicopter raid could frighten a neighborhood, alert informants, and warn other members of the network. Convoy could be seen. Pattern could be studied. And Al-Qaeda in Iraq was studying everything. That is why the British emphasis on patience before violence became so important. A raid was not simply an assault. It was the visible end of invisible work. Surveillance had to establish who entered a building, who left it, what vehicle was used, whether children were inside, whether the target was sleeping there or only passing through. The more accurate the picture became, the smaller the assault could be. This was the difference between force and precision. A large strike package could compensate for uncertainty with mass. The SAS tried to reduce uncertainty before the strike began. That did not make their work safer. In some ways, it made it more dangerous. Smaller teams had fewer men, fewer reserves, and less margin if the situation collapsed. But they also carried less noise into the operation. Less noise meant less warning. Less warning meant more chance of taking a target alive. And a living detainee with documents, phones, or memory could open another door in the network. Open-source accounts of the Joint Special Operations Campaign describe Task Force Black as being based around an SAS squadron in the Baghdad area, integrated with other British Special Forces elements and increasingly connected to the wider JSOC campaign. By late 2005 and early 2006, that integration gave the British a more central role against Sunni militant groups, especially al-Qaeda in Iraq. But integration did not erase identity. The Americans brought scale and reach. The British brought a habit of operating small, quiet, and close. The result was not rivalry for its own sake. It was a hard lesson in what the enemy actually feared. What the enemy feared was not the uniform or the badge or the reputation built around Hereford. It was the uncertainty. With a helicopter assault, the sequence was often obvious. Rotor noise, movement in the street, doors smashed, rooms cleared, detainees taken, aircraft lifting away. It was terrifying, but it had a rhythm. A network could learn that rhythm and build survival around it. The SAS tried to break the rhythm. Their approach drew from a long British Special Forces tradition that the National Army Museum traces back to the North African desert in 1941, where small SAS groups were formed for raids behind enemy lines. That origin matters because the regiment was not born as a heavy assault force. It was born around surprise, distance, improvisation, and the ability to strike where the enemy believed no organized force could reach. The setting had changed from desert airstrips to Baghdad safe houses, but the logic had not disappeared. In Iraq, the target was no longer an aircraft on a remote strip. It might be a courier carrying a phone, a financier using a family home as cover, a bomb maker whose value was not only in what he had done, but in what he knew. Killing such a man could end one threat. Capturing him could expose 10 more. That is why the SAS method placed so much value on controlled violence. The purpose of the raid was not simply to demonstrate power. It was to preserve the intelligence inside the room. A laptop left open, a mobile phone still charged, a notebook not yet burned, a suspect alive enough to be questioned. In the hidden war against al-Qaeda in Iraq, these things were battlefield terrain. And this is where billion-dollar technology could both help and hinder. Surveillance could identify movement. Signals could point to relationships. Analysts could map a network. But the final 20 meters still belonged to men on the ground. If those men arrived too loudly, the intelligence could vanish before they reached the door. If they arrived quietly, the room itself became evidence. This was the practical meaning of low-signature warfare. It was not romantic minimalism. It was not a rejection of modern equipment. It was a calculation. Use the machine to understand the network, then use human surprise to take it apart before it reacts. The SAS were not hunting al-Qaeda by ignoring technology. They were hunting by refusing to let technology announce them. By 2008, the broader security picture in Iraq had changed. The insurgency had not disappeared, but the pressure on al-Qaeda in Iraq had become relentless. British forces were remembered publicly for Basra and the difficult politics of southern Iraq, but the secret British role in Baghdad was different. Smaller, quieter, and far less visible. The National Army Museum notes that British troops served in Iraq from 2003 until withdrawal in 2009, conducting counterinsurgency, training, and stabilization duties. Behind that larger campaign, British Special Forces worked inside a narrower world of raids, surveillance, and intelligence-led targeting. The lesson was not that helicopters were useless. Black Hawks, aircraft, and joint operations centers gave coalition forces reach no small team could match alone. The lesson was more precise. In a counter-network war, the most expensive tool was not always the most decisive tool at the final moment. Sometimes the advantage was arriving without being recognized as an operation at all. That is why the SAS campaign in Baghdad remains such a powerful case study. Technology could build the map, but men still had to read the street. Intelligence could identify a target, but judgment had to decide how close to get, when to move, and how much force was enough. The regiment's older habits, forged around surprise, endurance, and independent decision-making, found new purpose inside a modern intelligence war. Al-Qaeda in Iraq was not degraded by one unit or one nation. It was pressured by a coalition campaign involving intelligence, American Special Operations, British Special Forces, Iraqi partners, and constant targeting. But within that campaign, the SAS proved something important. A small force did not need to be louder than the enemy. It needed to be closer, faster, and harder to predict. The machine could see. The machine could listen. The machine could follow the signal. But in the last silent seconds before a door opened in Baghdad, the weapon that mattered most was still the trained human mind. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for more military history stories where tactics, courage, and battlefield decisions changed the course of the war.